Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you and welcome to this panel discussion. Our presentation is on building with Earth, bridging past and future for net zero architecture. So I'm Professor Beke Okelina. I'm Professor of History and Africana Studies at the State University of New York in Cortland. And I have here with me Dr. Toki Lawton Brown, who is our heritage architect and our lead architect on this particular project. I have three other people that are not here with us today. Would have loved to be here, thanks to the Irish government and their visa problems. Right? They don't, for some reason, they don't like giving visas to Africans that much, and I'll call them out on that. Right? I know we're on YouTube. Let them hear it. Yeah. So the other three are not here with us. One is architect Robert Utetang, who is also an architect working on this project with us. And then we also have engineer Peace, who is also one of our trainers and our rammed earth trainers. And consultants. He's also not here with us today. And finally, we have one of our youngest intern and very active and very promising, Etel Biwam Oga, who is also not here with us. All of these people have contributed significantly to this particular project. Let me get a clicker for the next slide. Okay, so this particular project, the Net Zero Housing project, the official title is Net Zero Sustainable Housing Training and Demonstration Center. The project is sponsored by Gede Henkel Stiftung. It's part of their social impact projects. Um, so I am the primary investigator on this particular project, and have a lot of people, a big team, including Dr. Toki here, working on this project, as I've mentioned before. This project actually is anchored on three main goals. The first one is sustainable construction, right? There's a lot of construction waste, a lot of CO2 as a result of construction. And so we started thinking, how can we make construction green by using local materials, and in the process also reducing the amount of carbon that we put into our environment as a result of construction. The second goal of this project is affordable housing, right? In a country like Nigeria, where we are working at, housing is very expensive. Cement, most of our houses are concrete buildings built with cement. The prices of cement has doubled in the last year. And so this makes housing unaffordable. So we started asking if we can use locally sourced materials for construction. It will make housing cheaper. And so the project is anchored on the use of rammed earth and very little cement in the construction process. And you're going to see that in this presentation. And the third part of it is to reduce youth unemployment and poverty by providing them marketable skills, so that in the project itself, the project is a training center for the youth, not only during the lifetime of this project. It's a 3-year cycle, not only during this cycle, but it will continue to be a training center for youth. And the goal here is to give them this skills. So if we are going to push this form of construction, we are giving them the skills so that they are able to basically employ themselves, right? Because they have a skill that can generate revenues for them, and this will help reduce youth poverty. So those are the three main goals of this project.
All right, so okay, I can hear myself. So the whole point of the project is taking people back to how they used to build, right? And so what I found out when I was researching for this building is that a lot of people have forgotten about their symbols, their traditional symbols, and their traditional writings. And so I got inspired to design this building using the Insimbidi symbol of unity, which you can see. Can you see? Right up there, unity. So that's the inspiration for the building design. And then again, because of the way things happen in Nigeria or parts of Africa where we see a lot of conflict, it was important that unity was the focus of this design, whereby using the CBD symbols, getting people used to seeing that symbol, because a lot of people think of it spiritually as a bad thing now because of Christianity, because of colonialism and all of that. And I wanted to make them see that we can still go back to our roots, use our ways of writing, and inspire our designs. So a first step into raising that awareness. And then from there, I designed the demonstration building. And so by doing this, it meant that I needed to look for youths that could work on this building, bring up these walls, and that's where I discovered the gap. We no longer have stonemasons, we no longer have people that can work with earth, and that became a major problem. Next. Next slide. So I had to take youths from Nigeria to Ghana to go and experience what was happening in Ghana. And this is where they found out how they could work with earth, because they were already working with earth. There were a lot of buildings where they were using the rammed earth technology. And so we needed to teach them how to work with soil, how to work with the soil, how to be able to build this particular wall there, and how to work with different designs when it comes to laterite. And so they started learning how to do their foundations. They started trials. We started working on soil recipes, on what type of compressed soils they can use in different regions, in different parts of Africa. And so we brought them back, next, to his village in Obudu. So that's where they started training and experimenting with the different soils there. And so you can see the different layers of laterite that we use here. So working with the dark earth, working with loamy soil, sandy soil, limestone, all of that, and changing the designs with the walls. And something significant happened with one of these walls. A tree fell on one of the walls and nothing happened to the wall. And all the villagers came to look at the build because they were so surprised. I'm like, but your forefathers were building, the foremothers were building with this, earth. And they were so surprised that nothing happened to the wall. And then they came back again with the minister, I think, commissioners.
One of the representative to Congress, the National Assembly.
And he came with a gun to sort of experiment with the walls, and they started shooting at the walls to see if it would stay, keep its form, and it was still holding its form. And they were like, oh my God, how come they didn't know about this? So raising their awareness, using things that they're actually scared of. Security is a big thing. And because of what happens around, they were very worried about gunshots and stuff like that. And that was a good way to experiment with the walls, funny enough. But yes, this was how we started all kinds of trials with earth, with rammed earth buildings. And now we're on site, on location. Next slide.
Yeah, just for a second. And one of the things that Ram Earth allows us to do is if we are building with cement and all that, we are very much worried about cost of keep buying cement and all that. We can try, we can experiment. If something doesn't work, we tear down the earth
and we
walls and we start all over again. And for the last for a year or so, we've been doing that.
Yeah. So reuse, recycle, this with earth. And so, no, we missed a slide. So we started working on the foundation now. Now we felt that we were ready to take the boys to the site. And so we started by reclaiming wood from the timber factories where they go and pan the woods, and we brought them to the site to start the foundation formation. Next slide. So these are examples of how they've been working on the foundation trenches and trying to do the setting out and the laying of.
Yeah.
And then we started a new experiment working with stone, because in this part of Nigeria, which is Abuja, there's stone everywhere. And then, another Bob Light moment where we figured out there are no stone masons at all anywhere to train them. So we had to do all of this again, experimenting with the laterite, experimenting with the stone, teaching them how to use stone laterite to do the foundation formations. Next slide. And that's it. That's us working on the site, laying out the stones, working with and showing them how they could do that. So it was literally going back to basics to get this done. It was a fulfilling experience having all these youth working on site and, figuring out, oh my God, we can do this with stone. Oh, we've been throwing stone away. Oh, really? We can do all of that happening on site, which was really cool. Next slide. And that's where we are at the moment. And so that's architect Robert. He has a few words to say as well. As he was teaching the youth as well, we're going to play that. But that's where we are at as of today, right?
Yes. Yeah, and part of the thing here with what we are doing, sometimes it might be a little bit slower because, again, it's a training site. So everything we do, they always we have to pause and explain over and over with so they understand why we do a certain thing. So this is a live site, right? So we just took a break from the site to come here, and we are returning right back to this site.
Point of correction: we took a break to come and do the organization of this.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're going right back after the conference.
Okay. So I'm going to play this short video again. It's during one of the days. So this was not recorded for the conference. It was during one of the days we were working on the site, and then I saw Architect Robert was doing some explanations with the trainees. So I started recording something, and then I came to him and put him on the spot to continue what he is saying to them. Yeah. Oh, we can play directly from YouTube. Okay. So what we are trying to do here is we are trying to construct. There's no audio.
Yeah, yeah, man. You just bring this on. Hang on a second.
All of the materials.
RP, we have audio now?
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry. Technical glitches at the moment. He couldn't get a visa to come, and now we're trying to show him his.
Can we?
Play directly from YouTube. Can we?
Yeah. Do you know where it is?
It's on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Visa issues, and now we can't stream him. Ah. Don't worry.
Oh, yeah,
Can you search on it?
I don't know if you. Yeah, we just since we have the link.
Okay.
Maybe they can go.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
you guys maybe we go on to you and maybe we can
Mhm.
come back
But
to this
yeah.
later?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, this video is supposed to be the end. So you can go right ahead.
Okay, well, applause at least.
Start.
See.
So who's
Yeah.
oh Jesus man. Stick that in there, good man.
Which one should I put?
Mhm.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Dina Abdesalam. I am a postgraduate researcher in Newcastle University. I'm presenting today a part of my research in progress, and it's entitled Between Loss and Continuous, examining less than 100 years old built heritage in Egypt, in Cairo, sorry. And I'll start by defining heritage, and heritage can be defined as a process of making, which means that built heritage is not just a stagnant, isolated monument. We can see also that there is a paradigm shift in the field of heritage from an expert-dominated field to a social participatory one, and from a heritage directed towards tourism and consumption to a heritage directed towards local and everydays, and from a government-centered activities to including civil societies. And we can see that heritage is also largely dominated by Eurocentric discourse, and many of the theories might not be we might not be able to apply them in contexts that don't share the same history and culture. So briefly, I will go through the Egyptian context. Egypt has a very large history that dates back to 1,000 years ago, which means that there are many heritage sites and built heritage that should be preserved. This created many challenges for modern heritage. On the other hand, policies and guidelines are not very developed when it comes to conservation and preservation, because there is overlapping in institutional roles, they are not following current mindsets or policies, and bureaucracy is also a challenge, and there is a lack of documentation. And on an institutional level, the approaches are mostly top-down, and the public is rarely involved in decision-making. So why did I choose less than 100 years old heritage? So this heritage is facing many challenges in the Egyptian context. In terms of there is demolition in order to modernize Cairo, destruction by the owners, violations by users, collapse in some cases, maintenance and other challenges that we can see here. And so moving on to why is this happening? First, it's related to the policies. If we look at this timeline, it presents the policies timeline since 1835, and the first laws until 1951 are were focusing on regulating stolen heritage, stolen antiquities in this case. And in the 50s, rent laws were introduced affecting modern heritage. Then, in 1983, this was the first law to regulate antiquities, and it also, like, just notice the language used is antiquities in this case. In 2001, there was an introduction of the National Organization of Urban Harmony, and this organization was responsible for urban fabric regulations and planning, and they introduced two laws, the 2006 and 2008, to regulate the built heritage. And as we can see that from 1983 to 2006, there were no laws in place to regulate the less than 100 years old heritage, which resulted in losing many heritage sites. Okay. So the law 117 from 1983 is a very important one, and it's still news. And looking at the definition of heritage that it proposes, it limits more than 100. It is limited to more than 100 years old built environment. Also looking at the language, the heritage is defined as antiquities. And the two recent laws, the 2006 law by the National Organization of Urban Harmony used heritage as a language, but still the criteria for listing is subjective and is based on experts' opinion. And interesting enough, one of the criteria is presenting a valuable tourist destination, which means that tourism plays a major role in listing heritage. The law 2008 defines buildings with special value as the ones that are not conforming to the first law, which is the law of antiquities that we saw earlier. And we can see that also the values used are based on the aesthetics. Those two laws show that the listing is subject to experts' opinion, and they highlight an approach based on the material side of heritage. And overall, we can see that there is a clear distinction between antiquities and heritage, old and new, and there is while it's a continuous process. Another challenge was the rent laws in 1950s. So the laws consisted of reducing the rent prices and freezing them. It allowed rental contracts to be inherited to future generations, and also people could sublet and rent without informing landlords. This means that if you have a place that was rented for £1, it's still till now rented in £1, despite the change in the economy of the country. And this affected the modern heritage in two ways. So if you have buildings that are occupied, original tenants are not found, and there are many conflicts, and most owners would just ignore those buildings because there is no benefit out of this. And if buildings are empty, buildings are purposely damaged by owners before reaching 100 years old threshold to legally replace them and make profit from a new development. Another issue is that under the framework of modernization and development of Egypt, 19th and 20th century sites are demolished to be replaced with new construction and urban development. We can see in the news here. And those demolition has been happening since the 20th century. However, heritage can be part of the modern city. In addition, some experts expressed their opinion about the reason behind violations and destruction, relating it to the lack of awareness, as they say. They gave the following reason. One reason is that people lack education about modern heritage because it wasn't introduced in their curriculum. Another reason is related to colonial mindset introduced in 19th and 20th century, where researchers were focusing on ancient Egyptians in relation to modern Egyptians, and excavations were prioritizing ancient Egyptian heritage over other civilization. And this mentality might have impacted locals till nowadays. So we would have Egyptians who would relate more to ancient Egypt rather than other civilizations like Arabs or Christians, though they share the same language and religion. The last reason is the economic challenges, and in their opinion, heritage can be considered as a luxury for some people. Okay. In relation to all this way, okay, I'll focus on my case study. So my case study is Heliopolis. It's a neighborhood located east of Cairo. It has a unique architecture. It's neo-Islamic. And this cathedral on the right is built in 1913 and is one of the most famous landmarks in this neighborhood. One of the most important incidents that happened in 2021 is that the government wanted to introduce a bridge in front of the cathedral, which would block the view, though it was listed as a Type A building. When this happened, the community objected, contacted parliament representatives, developed an online petition, and proposed alternatives. And they succeeded to stop the project. From this example, we can see that even when the heritage is classified, modernization plans are prioritized. But most importantly, that even the public that might appear to lack historical education, they are still aware of their heritage. So the heritage that the public prioritizes is very different from the one that the authority prioritizes. Finally, we see here two definitions of heritage in the same neighborhood. One that is identified by the authority, the one that is identified by the authorities, the one that is prioritized, preserved, and present planned intervention, and on the upper hand, we have a heritage that is defined by the people, the one that is preserved by the public and adapting to their needs. They both represent the process of making. However, the question is, are policies representing the public understanding of heritage? Thank you.
I will stand if possible, because I need to talk in a more dynamic way. Can you help me? Just something got blocked. Got blocked. Nice. Okay, perfect. This is mine. Great. If I stand here, am I still? Yes. Perfect. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to this panel. My name is Giustina Selvelli. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Ljubljana. I'm an anthropologist, a sociolinguist. So today I'll be talking about my new project, which recently started. So I'll be very grateful if you have any feedback, because this is kind of an innovative field for me. I'm still trying to experiment in a transdisciplinary way. And this is why you will find a comparative case with many different questions that are still open in my research agenda. So I hope it will be entertaining enough for you. So the name of my project is Minor Echoes. It is funded by a Marie Curie Utopia grant, and its aim is to investigate the patterns of resistance to the destruction of so-called eco-cultural heritage in two Eastern European borderlands. Why did I choose this project? I had the feeling somehow that the source and the vicissitudes of indigenous and autochthonous people in Europe were not enough covered by the media and also by research in a way. So since I have always dealt with ethno-linguistic minorities in Europe from a linguistic and anthropological way, I wanted somehow to refer to the conditions that allow this diversity to thrive in Europe. And somehow I feel that linguists are not sensitive enough towards the material environment of speakers. Many times communities are forgotten because linguists focus so much on the languages themselves. Of course, this is very important to document endangered languages that are part of the heritage of these communities, but there is a kind of missing link with the context. And the context is the material context. So I define heritage in this eco-cultural sense as both the physical environment, but also the cultural, tangible, and intangible heritage of the communities. So how to preserve this cultural diversity in Europe, because this diversity is actually eroding. Many minority languages in Europe are now endangered. That means that in maybe a few generations they will disappear. So out of these many hundreds of languages in Europe spoken by minority communities, we are now losing like many of the speakers because they assimilate for many different reasons, and so this is a very bad perspective for Europe, let's say. So also I want to here focus on the specificity of the minority position. Why minorities? By, let's say, researching in a comparative way different cases in Europe, I try to demonstrate that for some reasons, which I'm here like asking to you as well, why minorities seems to have been disproportionately affected by patterns of environmental destruction. So, and this also opens a new questions of new question of investigation, because we are now here like somehow trying to figure out why this matters, why does minority heritage matter, and why does that also has a different meaning for minorities who are deprived of their own state, especially. So in my investigation, I focused on two ethnic minorities who do not have their own state that sometimes coincides with a border country. For example, Slovenians in Italy, they are an ethnic minority, but they have Slovenia also as a neighboring country that supports them in a way. But the communities I'm focusing on do not have this luck, let's say, so they're even more vulnerable. And this is why I believe that their heritage, their material heritage, counts even more in a way, because that's a way, the preservation of this heritage is a way to prevent the disappearance of these cultural communities. But many times this heritage is not protected so by the state. So this is why in my research I try to investigate these so-called strategies of visibility, how to give visibility to this vulnerable heritage. So how do communities, minority communities themselves, organize and try to, let's say, make their voices heard, the voices belonging to their endangered heritage. And this is why in my research I have, and I'm already trying to analyze public demonstrations, but also performances of remembrance that regard the lost landscape, the lost heritage in a way. And also in this analysis I'm trying to focus in particular on the use of the endangered languages. And in particular I'm focusing on two communities that are experiencing the destruction of their landscape, or have experienced that throughout time, because of the expansion of mining activities, which is a reality in Europe. Maybe we don't speak enough about that, but that's a reality, unfortunately. So the first community I'm focusing on is the Sorbian ethnic minority in Germany, in the eastern part of Germany. So this is a Slavic-speaking community that has been affected in a very strong way in the last 100 years by the expansion of lignite, brown coal mining in the eastern part of Germany. And as I define it here, it's a kind of unknown tragedy that is still happening in the EU, and that is not really so well covered by international media. By German media, yes, maybe, but not by international media. So it's something really important to focus on, I believe. So this is the map. You see on the east, you have Poland, on the northern part, let's say, and Czech Republic in the south. So it's a border area. And this is also another defining element of my two case studies. So what is also the role of borders and of the marginality of such communities which are already exposed to forms of marginalization in a way. So what is also the impact of their location geographically, just close to another border, let's say. So this is what happened to these communities, is that over the course of the last 100 years, and also during different political regimes, many of these Sorbian villages have been destroyed. We're talking about over 130 villages. They have been completely wiped out, so destroyed piece by piece, and no, let's say, piece of cultural heritage has been spared, including monuments, churches, and even graveyards sometimes. So most of the destruction happened during communist times in Eastern Germany. Nevertheless, after the democratic transition, this is also continuing to some extent, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s. One very famous case was the village of Horno. So this is a village that had to be completely destroyed, and then its community resettled to a new neighborhood in another town close to the Polish border. And this actually did arise the attention of many international media back then, because there were many petitions trying to save it, even from Swedish media and let's say there was a lot of transnational solidarity trying to prevent the destruction, which unfortunately was not enough. So other villages were actually not only destroyed but also flooded for the creation of some reservoirs in the southern part actually of Lusatia. And it's not clear how many, but we are talking about at least 20,000 people who have been somehow impacted by these patterns of forced relocation and resettlement. Regarding the impact on the tangible, intangible cultural heritage, so we are talking about destruction of the villages, but also the erosion somehow of cultural ties, of sense of place. We heard a lot about the importance of place making and the sense of identity that derives from the positionality in a specific geography. So of course, by resettling the whole community in another village, you're trying to, let's say, somehow preserve the sense of community, but it's not really enough. It doesn't really work like that, I would say. The sense of placemaking and the feeling of a shared heritage cannot be transported so easily, let's say, to another dimension geographically. So it's not possible to rebuild also like that artificially relationships and histories. And one important factor, as I mentioned earlier, is the impact on the language patterns and language use of these communities. So in the Sorbian case, we have a very, let's say, decrease in the number of speakers who are now fluent in this language, which is actually divided into two officially recognized variants, literary variants, so Lower and Upper Sorbian. One of the two is actually in a better state, but still we are talking about around 30,000 speakers compared to the 130,000 roughly. Of course, this data is not precise, in less than a century. So this is why this is particularly vulnerable situation. As I mentioned, there were patterns of resistance. So this is a picture that is demonstrating the willingness of the villagers of the town of Horno, the village I mentioned earlier, to resist. And this is the one that also spread all over the international media back then. We are talking about the early 2000s especially, when these people were trying to prevent the expansion of the last, let's say, open cast mine. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, the protests were not enough to prevent this from happening. So this is why this new neighborhood, Neuhorno, New Horno, which is also an interesting, I think, let's say, title to think about heritage. What happens when we create a new thing, a new village, a new whatever kind of cultural heritage that then has this label of new? I think there are many strange implications in this. So this Neuhorno is actually very aseptic part of the new town, and it's not really looking the same way as the former village, let's say. Very interestingly, in terms of cross-border cultural heritage, is what happened in 2014, when actually some Polish protesters united with the German and Sorbian ones in defending the heritage of the villages and of Sorbian heritage, let's say, from the planned destruction by combining their forces, let's say. So they formed this human chain in a cross-border way, so from Germany to Poland, 8-kilometer human chain. That was very interesting, like something innovative in a way, new strategy, also to help sensibilizing in a European perspective the implications of the continuation of this industry of course, coal mining in the heart of Europe, let's say. And also a very interesting factor is the use of folkloric heritage in Sorbian protests. This is quite limited, but there is an important representative, a woman now in her 80s, who has been on the forefront in combating the expansion of open cast mining, and she's very often wearing this traditional Sorbian folk dress. So this is a very important factor in sensibilizing, precising on the impact on the minority heritage, which is here, of course, paying the heaviest toll. Now I'm moving to the second context. I'm sorry, I have to be very fast. We know time is limited. But this is another marginal, so-called marginal or marginalized context, which is not even in the European Union. It is in actually in a country that is a candidate for EU entrance, which is Serbia. So we are talking about the east of Serbia. I'll now show it on the map. And also here there is a minority community that is being affected by the patterns of open cast mining expansion. In this case, we are talking about copper mining, and it's the Chinese multinational Zijin, which entered the state-owned, formerly majority state-owned copper mining in Bor, in the city of Bor, in eastern Serbia, and is now, let's say, changing what is happening in the territory. The impact is really, really strong on the community, and especially on the environment and on the cultural heritage. So this is the map. You see Bor there. So especially the villages around Bor. The blue area means the area populated by this Vlah, a Roman-speaking community that speaks a language closer to Romanian, let's say. So there are also many important ties and cross-border implications in this case. So Romania is there, not so far. Also Bulgaria is not so far. Also in this case, a kind of triple border. The environmental damage that has been, let's say, brought by the Zijin multinational in the last year has been immense. We have like pollution of rivers, especially of this river Pek, a tributary of the Danube, but also dust and constant noise to which the villagers are exposed to. So they cannot even sleep at night because the mining activities go on 24 hours a day. And there are cracks on their roofs, on the houses, and even the animals that live there in these farms are being affected. So this is why this is a really eco-cultural heritage in a way, and that's been affected. Also, the traditional economic lifestyle, Vlah community members are traditionally engaged in some farming activities, but also beekeeping so much. So I was there just 2 months ago, and the people who I interviewed, they were telling me about the dying of bees, and they say, in some parts they're not dying, so we are sure that the dust has not reached them. But you know, bees are really indicators of the state of health of an environment. So when they start dying, it means, of course, that people also start dying. And actually, the statistics are saying that the people who live in these villages, in Krivel and Ostre, that I will show you, live at least like 10 years less than the average of Serbian people, like life expectancy. So this is, now I read people are even saying 25 years less. I don't know how that can be possible, but 10 is for sure. So there's a very heavy impact of cancer and many, many other diseases. So an impact on the vulnerable Vlah heritage, because also the Vlah language and communities, let's say, can be considered as vulnerable and endangered. This Vlah language is spoken by around 20,000 members. I mean, it depends, of course, statistics are different. In the census, most Vlachs did not define themselves as Vlachs, and when I asked them, they were like, I asked them why. It's strange, especially due to what is happening. They're like, we feel Serbian, we don't want to create any like idea that we are like secessionists, so that we don't want to live in Serbia. We feel Serbian and Vlah. But now, after what is happening, like in the last months, the planned destruction of more villages, many people told me if we could now again go to, let's say, define ourselves in the census, we would definitely say we are Vlachs. So maybe things will change, who knows, if they will remain in these villages, actually. So this is one of the villages, a village of Krivel, which is now threatened by the expansion of these open cast mining activities. And the forced relocation is planned, but contrary to what I mentioned about the village of Horno in Germany, there is no planned relocation. There are simply no plans by the state or the municipality about where these people will go. So there are only rumors. People are hearing rumors. If we don't sell the houses and the property to the Chinese by 2023, we won't get any money. So they're trying to do it as fast as possible, but they don't have any any security about what will happen. So some of them, most of them, have already sold, and they're just moving somewhere else very far, and they're aware that their sense of community and identity will be eroded for sure. And they say there will be no Vlah language, no Vlah community, no Vlah culture anymore. But also others really reacted in these last months, especially since last January. I was there when the blockade was at this very like strong moment. They are like trying to prevent Chinese-owned vehicles and Chinese employers, let's say, being to pass from the village to go to the mine. So they've been like putting up this blockade since months. It started in late January. It is still continuing to some extent. So the villagers are trying to react at least in a way to show that Chinese cannot decide on everything, let's say. And it's also interesting the use of the Vlach language. In this case, it's written as the Serbian language in Cyrillic, which is also interesting pattern. But you see there are only Serbian flags also to show that they feel Serbian actually. They don't feel Romanian, for example, which is another story that is brought up by the media sometimes to stigmatize them. And also similarly, there is use of Vlach folkloric heritage. The last woman here, Jasna, is one of my main informants, and she went to the Serbian parliament for the meeting of the National Council of Minorities, and she decided to wear this dress also to sensibilize, let's say, on the importance of preserving this heritage and to the problems and the threats that are now, let's say, somehow regarding this minority. So just to finish, because I know I took so much time, I just wanted to, as I said at the beginning, to reflect on the like different patterns of, let's say, implications from the expansion of mining activities and destruction of the heritage regarding majority and minority. So what is the difference? Can we talk about difference? And what if we include regional heritage in this sense? Can it be considered as national? Is it a minority? What do we have to preserve? And why does minority heritage matters? And matters maybe even more, but this is a provocation. And also this solastalgia, which I use as a concept to define these feelings of loss that people feel when they see the destruction of their familiar landscapes and also heritage, we can say, because as this morning we have learned, like the vision of landscape, the view on landscape, that's an important part of our heritage. So it's something that we should be preserving. So when your view is so disturbed, let's say, by seeing the destruction of your familiar landscape, so what are the implications, and why is this even more important for minorities who do not have their own state? So as I argue here, the sacrifice of these places is a deliberate act, and the lack of protection by state authorities of the vulnerable heritage and also the heritage of diversity in a way. So this is why it has different implications. So okay, these are just some sentences to wrap up my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available for any comments or questions. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Really about the two cases of destruction of ecological and cultural heritage. Uh, One of the things I have heard in some of these forums is that there could be, say, an incompatibility between regional and national heritage, while my position is that regional heritage and national heritage do not cancel each other. They may even, in fact, reinforce themselves mutually. That is, it's not a zero-sum game. And for example, in the case of the blacks, they can actually enrich the heritage universe of Serbia, for example. That's my opinion. And I see that however, they are thinking, it seems that the Serbian government is thinking in the zero-sum mentality, where they think that any local heritages could be subversive to the national discourses.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this comment. It's very useful, very important. I also believe that, of course, the national panorama of Serbian heritage could be reinforced and strengthened when it would somehow include also its minorities. An interesting fact is that this is already happening, but in other parts of Serbia. The autonomous province of Vojvodina, for example, in the north of Serbia, is highly valued as a highly multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic region. And of course, it's been promoted in tourism, and of course, its city capital even won the award of European Capital of Culture in 2021 because of this diversity. But I have the feeling that there is a kind of, how to say, sense of selective diversity. So for some reason, this diverse heritage of Eastern Serbia has been sacrificed and is not really highly valued as important enough to be included in some tourism promotion, for example, or some sense of, let's say, pride in a national and regional heritage. Thank you.
There is also a reason of the other interest why this community is sacrificed.
Mm-hmm.
And regarding to that, have you also, in your research, are you going to address also the economical circumstances of this community? Because as it has been seen from the, and as I know, I don't know exactly what are the material conditions, the economic circumstances of the Serbians in Germany. And on the other hand, what is the institutional ecosystem? I suppose that there is an institute for the research of the Serbs, but for the blacks in Serbia there is nothing. Am I right? I don't know.
Absolutely, yeah, there's nothing in Serbia, no such thing actually. There are some, let's say, researchers who, at the Institute of Balkan Studies in Belgrade, for example, are focusing on black heritage. I was lucky enough to travel with one of them to the black areas in April. But yes, there is no support, and also there is, of course, some implication about the role of Romania, which sometimes is seen as, let's say, uncomfortable because it's trying to somehow claim this minority as part of its heritage. So this is also an implication that is problematic. And regarding the more like economic aspect of, let's say, mining, one thing that has to be said is that there are some villagers who are in favor of open cast mining activities because they are employed, let's say, in these facilities. But of course, all of them, at least in Serbia, they criticize like the way this is done in comparison to the past when it was state-owned and the activities were not so harmful to the environment. It was still more contained, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you to all three speakers for fantastic talks. I'm afraid I've got two questions. First for Justina, again, thank you. A very, very interesting talk, and the processes that you're discussing there of large-scale spatial cleansing and relocation of communities are highly interesting, and I'd be very curious to hear how they're rationalized by the actors involved in it, especially in terms of are the existing communities involved in the extractive industries? Are they employed by them locally? Or are they being relocated with some kind of promised betterment, improved housing or the likes? Professor Michael Hertzfeld has written quite a lot about this process of spatial cleansing and promised betterment, and I don't know if you've encountered him, but I'd highly recommend his writing in that. And just following on from that, also thank you, Dina, for extremely interesting talk. And I just wanted to ask for clarification on this 100-year-old rule and the process that you briefly mentioned on how owners of structures are intentionally destroying them before they reach that 100-year-old point, and therefore the protection mechanisms start applying. And that's such an interesting process of intentional destruction of structures before they become heritage.
Yeah.
Is that really the case? Is that
Yeah. It's especially common in residential building, because you reach a point where, because those buildings date back to like the 19th century. So at a certain point, the owners cannot get any benefit out of this. They have very low rents, so they cannot even maintain the building. Nothing. They cannot do anything, and sometimes they cannot even kick out the tenants because they can sublet it to someone else, and you can inherit the contract. So normally, if you have the rule, like the contract is, if you have a person who was renting this place and his relatives used to live in this place, they can inherit the renting contract. So this can last forever as long as it's inherited. So at the end, they wait till somehow those apartments are just like they don't have anyone inside, and then they just like purposely like do something with the structure, water somewhere, and then you have bit of it that is collapsed. And then at this point they can claim, oh, this building is not useful anymore, can we replace it with something else, before it reaches 1,100 years old. Yeah, that's that.
No, I think we don't have enough time anymore. Oh, it's tea break? Oh, okay.
Already?
Sure. Yeah,
Oh.
okay. Yeah,
No,
okay.
can't we watch this?
Okay, yeah, so.
Yeah, it's early still.
But set was
Yes, okay. We are trying to construct this building sustainably. So we want to try to use as much as possible all of the materials that are very local in the Abuja area. So in Abuja, we have stone, right? Stone is a very common material in Abuja. Everywhere you go, you see stone. We also have a lot of laterite in Abuja, very good laterite in Abuja. So instead of concentrate on using a lot of concrete or what we might think of the German floor system, so we are trying to use more of laterite and stone to do this foundation. So that is what has just happened here with this foundation that you have built, using this stone and using laterite, kind of like a binder, laterite with stone dust as a binder for this foundation. But coming here, he's doing something different. So that's what I want him to explain, why instead of just using concrete, cement and stone here, you're actually using laterite and stone dust here. So what are you trying to do here with this?
Yes, basically like I was telling them, first of all, the essence of having a foundation in a house is to provide a base for the building, to have a base. You excavate. While you excavate so that you get to a ground, the part of the ground that is strong, is of good bearing capacity. Otherwise, with time, one side of the house will sink down, the other one will not sink. It begins to bring cracks on the building. So you dig it, but when you have a level ground where the ground is strong, of good bearing capacity, it has the strength to carry that load where you impose on. Because that building you are putting, those blocks, whatever that you are putting, those walls, they all carry load. They are heavy. So as they press on the ground, they will begin to depress the ground and go down. So when you dig the foundation to the place where the ground is strong, you will find out that it will be stable. If you see, from instance, look at, I can show you, for instance, look at this depression here. This soil that you see is not a soil of good bearing capacity. So if you had put a wall here now, this wall will sink. This soil that you see will not sink. Then you will see cracks coming up on that wall. So we have come from that level to this level here. Why is the essence of putting what people call German floor or DPC, whatever? The reason is to prevent water from seeping from the ground into the walls or into the building itself, into the floors. That is the only primary reason for it. And giving the floor a level surface, that is the essence of that foundation. Yes, commonly we use cement, concrete, chippings or stones, gravel and sand to prepare that German floor. But it's an expensive way of doing it. Based on what we are trying to achieve here, what we are trying to demonstrate here is that we can make use of our local materials that we have, which everybody has in his compound. If you want to build in your house, in your compound now, we don't want you to be struggling to see whether you will bring chippings from here, you will bring this from there or that, cement and whatever. we believe that you can use your earth, your ordinary earth laterite, and still achieve the same thing. You know, that's why we did this demonstration here that day, so that you can see that this floor, as you have seen it, is just 2 days. I mean, yes, yesterday. So it's sufficiently strong now. It's still gaining strength. It has not reached its maximum. It's still gaining strength by the day. You know. So by the next 1 week now, this thing will be as strong as stone, will be as strong as any German floor that you see anywhere, but at a cheaper cost. You know, at less than 20% of the cost on using cement. If you are used cement, what we
So we're going to pause. I'm going to make the video, the full video, available on
Online.
on the streaming channel, YouTube streaming channel. But something else I just wanted to quickly mention: this whole structure is going to be built without any. It's a one-story building. It's going to be built without iron rods, right? Because again, iron rods are very expensive. Um, poorer people cannot afford to build, and they are not local to us. So we'll be able to raise all the walls up without using any iron rods. Even the rammers, we are experimenting with wooden rammers rather than iron rammers, because again, iron is extremely expensive in Nigeria. So with that flooring, we were able to achieve it using only wooden rammers. Even with the experimentation with our rammed walls, generally we use the woods we use. I can't remember now. Marine boards, right? We use marine boards, and marine boards are imported in Nigeria, so which makes them very expensive. So we started experimenting with using local wood to construct those boards, and those also worked perfectly. So we are working on this project, trying to document and experimenting with a lot of things, and our goal is to be able to reduce construction costs by about 70%. That's what the goal is. So far, I think we are achieving it, but just watch out for maybe by the end of this year when we conclude the project. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very kindly for your very delightful presentation on the panel. And I am very interested in what you're doing with local material. My quick question is, how permeable is the ground, and how deep do you go to form the foundation in any of these buildings for what you're doing? The second question is, are you working with the Department of Labor Statistics in the training part, because unemployment is huge in the whole of West Africa? And if that is the case, how are they helping in bringing the youth in learning, you know, whatever the process is? On the other side of the panel, since I have the microphone, how are the Serbs dealing with people in Montenegro? Are they working together? Is there a spillover effect in Montenegro for the minoritized groups in the area? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first one is very technical. I would take that one, and Becca can take the second one. So it depends on the area. So we have areas where it's highly flooded, so it depends on what type of foundation that we can put there, whether it's a raft or a strip foundation. And so again, you can't determine the depth until you've done your site visit and you know exactly how the area is before you decide what sort of foundation to put there. But in this particular case, we went down
3 feet.
3 feet.
Yeah.
And parts of it are highly waterlogged in some areas, but some other areas are still okay. So we're going with the raft to just be on the safe side. Thank you.
Yeah, the question about labor. Generally, for this project, we are not involving the government at all. Part of that is the bureaucracies when you have to deal with the government. Some parts of our project, we were working with the University of Calabar. Even there, we experienced a lot of bureaucratic bottlenecks and all of that, and we can't keep waiting for the bureaucracy when these young people need to be on site working, right, and learning. So we work with the communities. So most of our young people come through the communities, the chiefs and all that, and our young people that we are training are from all over the country, right? And Dr. Toki mentioned earlier this training, even in Ghana, we were able to bring together young people in Ghana. So the impact of this project is not only in Nigeria, the impact of the project we hope is going to be throughout the west coast of Africa. So far, we've trained over in our training and over 30 young people are part of the training programs. Yeah.
It's 100.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So regarding Serbia and Montenegro's, let's say, cooperation in this field of minority protection, there is none in this sense. But there's another point, which is the fact that actually Serbs consider themselves now a minority in Montenegro since independence of Montenegro in 2006. So this is another question. But one thing that really makes them similar is the fact that there is a lot of Chinese and Russian capital entering both countries. And this, of course, has different implications for the environment and for the different communities that make up these two countries, which are somehow characterized by some diversity, inner diversity. But there are I'm not aware of any, let's say, presence of Vlach minority in Montenegro that has maybe expressed itself about what's happening in Serbia. I'm not aware, but this is a good point. I'm going to try to find out. Thank you.
All right, I think we're done.
Thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank
attending
you.
our panel. Thank you.